There is a place off the coast of California where the rules of society were meant to end. A fortress of steel and stone surrounded by water so cold, so violent, that authorities considered it a death sentence of its own. They called it the Rock. For 29 years, Alcatraz stood as the ultimate symbol of American justice, a prison designed to hold the very worst of humanity behind its impenetrable walls. The federal government insisted it was escape-proof. They were wrong. On the night of June 11, 1962, 3 men stood on the edge of America's most secure prison, staring into the freezing, ruthless currents of the San Francisco Bay. They were about to attempt the impossible, and then they vanished. To this day, no one knows for certain if they survived or if the bay swallowed them whole. This is the story of the greatest prison escape in American history. It is a tale of pure genius, chilling desperation, and a mystery that has haunted investigators for over 6 decades. To understand the sheer audacity of this escape, you first have to understand the reality of Alcatraz. It wasn't just a prison, it was a psychological weapon. Perched on a rugged island in the middle of San Francisco Bay, it was a constant looming reminder to criminals across the country that there was a place where hope went to die. The water separating the island from the mainland is notoriously treacherous. The temperature hovers around 50 degrees year-round. Hypothermia can set in within minutes. Beneath the surface, the currents are violent, pulling outward toward the Pacific Ocean at speeds that can overwhelm even the strongest swimmers. The guards didn't even need to patrol the perimeter. They let the bay do the work. Inside the concrete walls, life was brutally monotonous. Silence was strictly enforced. Inmates were reduced to numbers, stripped of their identities, and forced to endure a mind-numbing routine designed to break their spirits. But within this sea of despair, 3 men harbored a dangerous, unbreakable will to be free. Frank Morris was the mastermind. An orphan with a checkered past, Morris had spent most of his life behind bars. He was a chronic escape artist, a man whose intelligence and cunning made him a threat to any institution. His IQ was measured in the top 2% of the population. Next were the Anglin brothers, John and Clarence. They were Southern men, bank robbers by trade, who shared a bond that went beyond blood. They had been separated and transferred from prison to prison, finally landing on Alcatraz, a punishment designed to isolate them from the world. Rounding out their inner circle was Alan West, a seasoned criminal with a knack for mechanics and a burning desire to see the outside world again. These 4 men shared a cell block. They shared whispered conversations in the yard, and eventually they shared a secret. They were going to break out of Alcatraz. The plan was not born overnight. It took months of meticulous planning, patience, and nerve. The vulnerability of Alcatraz lay not in its walls, but in its aging infrastructure. The prison was undergoing repairs, and the inmates noticed something the guards had overlooked. Behind the sinks in their cells, there were ventilation ducts. Over the years, the salt air had corroded the concrete surrounding the grates. If a man was determined enough, he could chip his way through. And so the excavation began. Using improvised tools, spoons stolen from the cafeteria, saw blades crafted from the motor of a broken vacuum cleaner, and anything else they could scavenge, the men began to dig. Night after night, while the guards walked their rounds, they chipped away at the rotten concrete. The noise was a constant risk. To mask the sound, Morris convinced the guards to let them play acoustic guitars during the evening music hour. The twang of the strings provided just enough cover for the scraping of metal against stone. But digging a hole was only the first step. They had to hide the damage. They crafted fake grates out of cardboard and painted them to match the walls. They concealed the fresh concrete dust in their pockets, scattering it in the exercise yard the next day. It was a slow, agonizing process. One wrong move, one loud noise, one misplaced piece of evidence, and the entire plan would collapse. But Morris was patient. The Anglins were loyal, and the concrete eventually gave way. Behind their cells lay an unguarded utility corridor, a vertical shaft that ran all the way up to the roof of the cell block. This was their highway to the top. But before they could make the climb, they had to solve another problem. The guards conducted head counts throughout the night. If an empty bed was discovered, the alarm would sound instantly. The solution was chillingly brilliant. They would leave decoys behind. Using a mixture of soap, toilet paper, and stolen concrete dust, they sculpted lifelike replicas of their own heads. They painted them with flesh-colored paint stolen from the art shop. To make them look entirely real from a distance, they gathered human hair from the barbershop floor and painstakingly glued it to the scalps. When night fell, they would place the heads on their pillows, pull the blankets up to the chins of the dummies, and slip away into the darkness. Then came the water. They knew they couldn't swim. The bay would kill them in minutes. They needed a vessel. Working in secret, they gathered more than 50 raincoats from fellow inmates. They glued them together using heat from the exposed steam pipes in the utility corridor, fashioning a makeshift raft and life preservatives. They even built a small pump out of a musical instrument to inflate the raft quickly once they reached the water. Every piece of the puzzle was coming together. The hole was dug, the dummy heads were ready, the raft was sealed, the date was set, June 11, 1962. The atmosphere inside Alcatraz that night was thick with tension. The routine was as always. The evening count was conducted. The guards walked the tiers, shining their flashlights into the darkened cells. They saw the lumps under the blankets, the tufts of hair on the pillows. Everything looked normal. The guards moved on. But behind the walls, the clock was ticking. Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin squeezed through the holes in their cells and climbed into the utility corridor. They began their ascent toward the roof. But Alan West was having trouble. The concrete around his vent was stubborn, and he struggled to loosen the final bolts. He worked frantically, his heart pounding in his chest, knowing that his friends were waiting above. Eventually, West managed to break through. He climbed into the corridor and made his way to the roof. But by the time he got there, the others were gone. He was alone on the roof of the world's most secure prison. He waited, shivering in the wind, but Morris and the Anglins were nowhere to be seen. They had made a calculated decision. They couldn't wait any longer. The tide was turning, and their window of escape was closing. West was left behind. The trio descended the outside of the building using a makeshift rope made from bed sheets. They hit the ground and scurried to the water's edge, avoiding the sweeping beams of the searchlights. They inflated the raft with their makeshift pump. The cold bay water lapped against their stolen raincoats. They pushed off into the darkness, leaving the lights of San Francisco twinkling in the distance like a promise. The next morning, the alarm finally sounded. When the guards conducted the morning count, they pulled back the blankets and discovered the terrifying, lifelike dummy heads. The realization hit them like a physical blow. 3 men were missing from the most secure prison in America. Panic set in. The entire island was locked down. The warden, desperate to maintain the myth of Alcatraz, insisted the men could not have survived, but the evidence was already beginning to surface. A massive manhunt was launched. The Coast Guard, the FBI, and local law enforcement scoured the bay. Boats crisscrossed the water. Helicopters searched the shoreline. The official narrative was that the men had drowned, that the freezing water and the fierce currents had claimed them before they could reach land. But as the days turned into weeks, the mystery only deepened. A paddle was found floating near Angel Island, a wallet wrapped in plastic containing the names and personal effects of the Anglin brothers washed ashore. Pieces of the raft along with a life preserver were recovered, but the raft had been carefully deflated and folded. It was not the debris field of a violent shipwreck. It was the deliberate action of men who had made it to shore. And then there were the bodies. There were none. In the weeks and months following the escape, no bodies washed up on the shores of the bay. The bay had a habit of giving up its dead, but it offered no such evidence here. This absence of proof became the most compelling evidence of all. Alan West, the man left behind, was interrogated relentlessly. He laid out the entire plan, convinced that his friends had made it. He believed they had a car waiting for them, that they had contacts on the outside ready to help them disappear. But without the men themselves, the story remained incomplete. The FBI conducted a massive 17-year investigation. They tracked down leads, followed rumors, and chased shadows across the country. But Frank Morris, John Anglin, and Clarence Anglin were never seen again, not officially. In 1979, the FBI officially closed the case. They concluded that the men had drowned in the bay, that their bodies had likely been swept out into the Pacific Ocean, lost forever to the deep. It was the clean official ending the government needed. Alcatraz closed its doors a year later, a victim of high costs and a changing penal system. The myth of the escape-proof prison had been shattered, and the federal government was eager to move on. But the story didn't end there. The U.S. Marshals Service, tasked with tracking down federal fugitives, kept the case open. And over the decades, a slow trickle of evidence has continued to surface, challenging the official narrative. Family members of the Anglin brothers have come forward with tantalizing clues. A Christmas card, supposedly from the brothers, arrived at the family home without a postmark. A photograph, taken in Brazil in 1975, shows two men who bear a striking resemblance to John and Clarence Anglin. Forensic experts have debated the authenticity of these photos for years. There are reports of the men living under assumed names, hiding in plain sight, bound together by the same loyalty that helped them survive the hell of Alcatraz. Modern oceanographic models have also cast doubt on the drowning theory. Scientists have simulated the currents of the San Francisco Bay on the night of June 11, 1962. They found that if the men had launched at precisely the right time, riding the outgoing tide, they could have been pushed past the Golden Gate Bridge and into the open ocean. But if they had launched just a little later, riding the incoming tide, they could have made landfall on the northern shore of the bay, near Marin County. The water was cold, yes. The currents were dangerous, absolutely. But if they had dressed in layers and stayed together, survival was not just possible, it was probable. The truth is, the escape of Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers is more than just a historical event. It is the reflection of the American spirit. It is the ultimate rebellion against an authority that declared them defeated. They looked at the most impenetrable fortress in the country, an institution designed to strip them of their humanity, and they found a way to beat it. They used their minds, their resourcefulness, and their sheer will to reclaim their freedom. Whether they died in the freezing waters of the San Francisco Bay or lived out their days in anonymous peace may never be known. The bay holds its secrets close, and the men, if they are alive, are not talking. But perhaps that is the true legacy of the Alcatraz escape. It is a mystery that refuses to be solved, a ghost story rooted in undeniable fact. The guards are gone, the cells are empty. The island is now a tourist attraction, a silent monument to a bygone era. But if you stand on the shore of San Francisco Bay and look out toward the rock, you can almost feel the presence of three desperate men pushing off into the darkness, defying the odds, and vanishing into the cold, unforgiving night, leaving behind nothing but a few stolen raincoats, some papier-mâché heads, and a mystery that will echo forever.